The candles were melting into themselves when I heard her car pull into the driveway. I'd been sitting there for 47 minutes, watching the wax pool around the wicks like little lakes of fire, thinking about how much a person can change in 2 years without you noticing until it's too late. The salmon was cold, the wine was warm, and I was something in between. That's the thing about anniversaries. They're supposed to be celebrations, but sometimes they're just mirrors you don't want to look into. I'd left work early to get everything right. Stupid, I know, but I'm a restoration architect. I fix broken things for a living. Old buildings, crumbling facades, foundations that have forgotten how to hold weight. I guess I thought if I could restore a century-old warehouse, I could restore whatever was crumbling between Lena and me. The dining room looked perfect. I'd even gotten those pretentious cloth napkins she liked from that overpriced boutique on 5th Street, the ones that cost more than my lunch budget for a week. The table was set like something out of a magazine spread, which felt ridiculous because we usually ate takeout in front of the television, but this was our anniversary. 2 years married, 4 years together. I wanted it to matter. The front door opened at 8:47. I'd checked my watch 3 times in the last minute. "Jason?" Her voice sounded tired. Or maybe annoyed. With Lena, those two things had started to blur together somewhere around month 18. "In here," I called out, standing up, smoothing down my shirt. She walked into the dining room and stopped. Just stopped, like she'd hit an invisible wall. Her eyes swept over the table, the candles, the effort, and something flickered across her face. Not pleasure, not gratitude, inconvenience. "What's all this?" she asked. "It's our anniversary," I said, and the words came out flatter than I intended. "I made dinner, your favorite." Lena set her purse down on the console table by the door. She was still in her work clothes, that gray suit that made her look like she belonged in boardrooms and power lunches, which, increasingly, she did. She'd been pulling 12-hour days for the last 3 months, always on her phone, always distracted. "I'm not really hungry," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I had a late lunch." I nodded slowly, looking at the salmon that I'd spent an hour preparing, the asparagus I'd roasted just the way she liked it, the potatoes I'd mashed by hand because she said the texture was better that way. "Okay," I said. "We could just sit, talk, have some wine." She looked at her phone. The screen lit up her face in the dim candlelight, and I saw her eyes dart across whatever message had just come through. A small smile played at the corner of her mouth, the kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "Actually, I'm exhausted," she said, thumb moving across the screen as she typed something back. "Rain check?" "Rain check, on our anniversary." "Sure," I said, because what else was there to say? She started toward the stairs, then paused, turned back. For a second, I thought maybe she'd realized what she was doing. Maybe she'd see the table, see me standing there like a fool in my good shirt, and remember that we used to be something worth celebrating. "Jason," she said, and my name in her mouth sounded like an obligation. "We need to talk, but not tonight. I'm too tired for this." "For what?" "For this." She gestured vaguely at the room, at me, at everything. "Just tomorrow, okay?" She didn't wait for an answer. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, heard the bedroom door close, heard the lock click. The lock. I sat back down at the table and poured myself a glass of wine, then another. The candles burned down to nothing while I sat there, thinking about all the small ways a marriage could end before anyone said the words out loud. The next evening, she didn't come home until after 9. I was in my office working on blueprints for a renovation project downtown when I heard her moving around in the bedroom. When I went upstairs, she was packing a bag. "What are you doing?" I asked, though somewhere deep in my gut I already knew. "I think I need space," she said, folding a sweater with mechanical precision. "I'm not ready for this level of commitment." The words hit me like cold water. Not ready? We'd been married for 2 years. We'd been together for 4. We'd bought this house. We'd talked about having kids. We'd built a life. Or at least, I thought we had. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "It means I'm 28 and I feel like I'm suffocating. It means I got married too young and I don't know who I am anymore. It means I need to figure out what I want without you hovering over me all the time." Hovering. I worked 50 hours a week. I'd given her every bit of space she'd asked for. I'd stopped suggesting date nights when she'd made it clear they annoyed her. I'd stopped asking about her day when my questions started feeling like interrogations to her. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Amanda's. She said I could stay with her for a while." Amanda, her college roommate, the one who'd been divorced twice by 30 and thought marriage was a patriarchal conspiracy. "Okay," I said, and the word felt like glass in my throat. "If that's what you need." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something flash in her eyes. Disappointment? Surprise? I couldn't tell. "You're not going to fight for us?" she asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. I could feel the test in it, the invisible wires and tripwires. Whatever I said next would be wrong. If I begged, I'd be weak. If I let her go, I'd be heartless. "I get it," I said slowly. "You need space." Something in her face tightened. She zipped her bag with more force than necessary. "Fine," she said. "I'll come back for the rest of my things this weekend." She left 20 minutes later. I stood at the window and watched her car disappear down the street, taillights fading into the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I just stood there, feeling the shape of the emptiness she'd left behind, wondering how I'd missed all the signs that must have been there. 2 days later, I was cleaning out the nightstand on her side of the bed, because apparently that was my job now, when I found it. A receipt. Crumpled up, shoved into the back of the drawer under some old magazines. The Riverside Inn. $347.89. Date, 3 days before our anniversary. I sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing out the wrinkles in the paper, staring at the itemization. 1 room, 2 nights, room service, champagne. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through her Instagram. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A photo from that weekend. A artfully filtered shot of a coffee cup on a balcony railing, city skyline in the background. Caption: "Sometimes you need to get away and clear your head." 63 likes, including one from Mason Reyes. Mason, her colleague. The guy she'd mentioned casually about a dozen times over the last few months. The one she'd had drinks with after work. The one she'd gone to that conference with in Portland. The one she'd said was just a friend. I opened my laptop and logged into our shared credit card account. The one we'd opened for household expenses. The one she'd promised she only used for groceries and bills. The charges told a different story. Dinner at Marcello's, $283, the night she'd said she was working late, 2 tickets to a concert, $340, the weekend she'd visited her sister, another hotel, different city, same pattern. I sat there until the sun came up, clicking through months of receipts, watching our marriage unravel in itemized lines and transaction dates. She hadn't needed space. She'd needed an exit strategy. And the worst part? She'd looked me in the eye on our anniversary. The anniversary, she'd already decided, meant nothing and acted like I was the problem. I closed the laptop, poured myself a coffee, went to work. But something had shifted. The grief was still there, sure, sitting in my chest like a stone. But underneath it, something colder was beginning to crystallize. She wanted space? Fine. I'd give her a galaxy. 3 months. That's how long it took for the divorce papers to arrive. I signed them in my car in the parking lot of the courthouse, my signature looking jagged and unfamiliar on the line. No lawyers, no drama. Lena wanted out, and I'd stopped caring why. The house felt bigger without her in it. Not empty, just bigger. Like a building I was restoring, all the walls stripped down to the studs, waiting for something new. I'd started going to the gym again, not because I was trying to impress anyone or do some cliché revenge transformation. I just needed somewhere to put the energy that used to go into worrying about what Lena wanted for dinner or why she was on her phone so much. The routine helped. Work, gym, home, sleep when I could, avoid the places we used to go together, stay off social media where she'd probably posted some empowering caption about finding herself. I was doing fine. Not great, but fine. Which is all you can ask for when your marriage explodes and you're trying to pick up the pieces without slicing your hands open. Then Sophia happened. Sophia Nguyen worked on the 3rd floor of our building, urban planning department. We'd been in the same meetings a dozen times, exchanged small talk at the coffee machine. She had this quiet competence about her, like she could solve complex zoning disputes before her morning coffee and never break a sweat. We ran into each other at a bookstore on a Saturday afternoon. She was browsing the architecture section, and we ended up talking for 2 hours at the coffee shop next door. It wasn't romantic. It was just easy. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers. She laughed at my sarcasm instead of telling me I was being negative. She didn't need me to be anything other than what I was. We started meeting for coffee, then lunch, then dinner. I wasn't looking for anything. Neither was she. But sometimes things just happen when you stop trying to force them, which is probably why Lena found out. The call came on a Wednesday evening. I was at my desk working on a proposal for a historic bank conversion when my phone lit up with her name. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Hello?" "Jason." Her voice was thick, choked. She was crying. Lena didn't cry. Not the Lena I'd known anyway. We need to talk. We're divorced, I said, keeping my voice neutral. What's there to talk about? How could you? The words came out in a sob. How could you just move on like that? Like I meant nothing? I leaned back in my chair, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what was happening. Lena, you dumped me. You said you needed space. You said you weren't ready for commitment. I gave you exactly what you asked for. But I didn't think you'd just replace me. Her voice rose, anger cutting through the tears. Ashley told me she saw you with someone at Lombardi's, looking all cozy and happy. Ashley, one of her friends, apparently still keeping tabs on me. I'm not replacing anyone, I said. I'm having dinner with a colleague. We're allowed to eat food. Don't patronize me, she snapped. I know what this is. You're trying to make me jealous. You're trying to hurt me. The accusation was so absurd, I almost laughed. Almost. Lena, I haven't thought about hurting you in months. I've been too busy trying to rebuild my life after you demolished it. Silence on the other end. Then quieter. Why didn't you fight for us? And there it was. The question she'd asked when she left. The question that had been eating at her while I'd been moving forward. Because you didn't want to be fought for, I said. You wanted to leave, so I let you. You were supposed to care enough to stop me. I did care. I cared enough to respect what you said you needed. Was that wrong? More silence. I could hear her breathing. Could picture her sitting wherever she was, phone clutched in her hand, mascara probably running. I made a mistake, she whispered. I thought I needed space, but I was wrong. I miss you. I miss us. 3 months ago, those words would have meant everything. Would have been exactly what I needed to hear. Would have felt like a life raft in dark water. Now they just felt like noise. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Not sorry enough to take her back, but sorry that we'd both wasted so much time on something that was already over. But we're done, Lena. We've been done for a while. You just finally said it out loud. So that's it? You're just going to throw away everything we had? You threw it away 3 days before our anniversary when you checked into a hotel with Mason. The words dropped like stones. I heard her sharp intake of breath. You knew? I found the receipt. Took me about 5 minutes to figure out the rest. Jason, Don't, I said. Whatever you're about to say, just don't. It doesn't matter anymore. I hung up before she could respond. Sat there staring at my computer screen, watching the cursor blink in and out of existence, feeling strangely calm. That should have been the end of it. But 3 weeks later, my boss called me into her office. Patricia Caldwell had run the architecture firm for 15 years. She was brilliant, fair, and didn't tolerate nonsense, which is why the expression on her face when I walked in made my stomach drop. Jason, sit down, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I sat. I received some concerning information yesterday, she said, folding her hands on the desk. From HR, anonymous complaints about your behavior at work. My behavior? I kept my voice level. What kind of complaints? She pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts of text messages. My text messages from months ago, taken completely out of context. Conversations with friends after Lena left, when I was angry and hurt and processing. Words that looked bad on paper without the surrounding context. These were sent to HR with a note suggesting you might be experiencing mental health issues that could affect your ability to work safely on construction sites. My blood went cold. Patricia, these are private messages, from my personal phone, taken out of context. I know, she said, and frankly, I think whoever sent these is out of line. But I have to investigate. It's policy. Who sent them? Anonymous tip, but the email account was traced to an IP address that matches one of the coffee shops on Market Street. The coffee shop 2 blocks from Lena's office. Patricia, my ex-wife is trying to sabotage me. Those messages are from right after our separation. I was venting to friends. That's it. She nodded slowly. I believe you, but you understand I have to follow protocol. I need you to meet with our counselor just to document that there are no concerns about your stability or safety. It's a formality. A formality that goes in my permanent file. Yes. I sat there, feeling the walls close in. This wasn't about my job. This was about control, about punishment, about Lena deciding that if she couldn't have me, she'd make sure I suffered. I'll do whatever you need, I said. But for the record, this is harassment. I know, Patricia said quietly. And off the record, you might want to consider legal action. This crosses a line. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not sadness, not grief, Rage, cold, clear, focused rage. She wanted to play dirty? Fine. But she'd forgotten something important. I was good at my job. I was good at research, at investigation, at finding the truth buried in old documents and forgotten records. And I was about to become very, very good at revenge. I went home and pulled out my laptop, started making a list of everything I knew about Lena's new life, her social media accounts, her work schedule, her friends, her routines, and Mason. Everything I knew about Mason Reyes. If she wanted to go to war, I'd give her one. But I'd fight smart. I'd fight clean, at least legally clean. And when it was over, she'd understand exactly what it felt like to watch your life crumble because someone decided you were disposable. I opened a new document and started typing. Not emotional ranting, not threats, just facts, dates, times, evidence, the hotel receipts, the credit card statements, the timeline of her relationship with Mason starting months before she asked for space. Then I made a phone call. Frank Ortiz, a gravelly voice answered. Mr. Ortiz, my name is Jason Carter. I was referred to you by Tom Henderson. I need to hire a private investigator. What's the situation? My ex-wife is trying to ruin my career. I need documentation of what she's actually been doing, legal documentation. There was a pause, then, meet me tomorrow. Bring everything you've got. I hung up and looked at the empty side of the bed where Lena used to sleep. You wanted space, I said to the empty room. You're about to get the whole universe. Frank Ortiz's office was exactly what you'd expect from an ex-detective turned private investigator. Cluttered desk, walls covered in framed commendations and old photographs, coffee maker that looked like it had survived at least 3 decades. He was mid-40s, gray stubble, tired eyes that had seen too much human garbage. Marriage cases, he said, leaning back in his chair. Always the messiest. What have you got? I laid out the credit card statements, the hotel receipts, the screenshots of Lena's social media posts with timestamps, the HR complaint, everything. Frank flipped through the pages with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this story 1,000 times before. She's smart, he said. Most people aren't this organized about covering their tracks. Your ex knows what she's doing. Can you prove it? Legally? Depends what you want to prove. The relationship? Easy. I can document every time they meet, every place they go. The HR complaint? Trickier. But if she used her personal devices or work computers to send those messages, there'll be metadata. I don't want to ruin her life, I said, surprised to find I meant it. I just want her to stop ruining mine. Frank studied me for a moment. You're a rare breed, Mr. Carter. Most people in your position want revenge. I want the truth, and I want her to face consequences. That's not revenge. That's justice. Fair enough. He pulled out a contract. Standard rate. I'll need 2 weeks minimum, and I'll need you to stay out of it. No confrontations, no social media stalking. You hired me to do this professionally. Let me do my job. I signed the contract and wrote him a check. Walked out of his office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. But staying out of it turned out to be harder than I thought. The first week crawled by. Every day I expected another call from HR, another anonymous complaint, another attempt by Lena to undermine what little stability I'd rebuilt. But nothing came. Just silence. Which somehow felt worse. I threw myself into work. There was a historical courthouse renovation that needed attention, original woodwork from 1887, marble columns that had weathered a century of footsteps and neglect. I spent hours measuring, documenting, planning how to preserve what was salvageable and recreate what was lost. Restoration work had always been meditation for me. You couldn't rush it, couldn't force it. You had to respect the original structure, understand what made it strong, figure out where the damage started and why. Then, slowly, carefully, you rebuilt. Kind of like what I was doing with my own life. Sophia started joining me for lunch more often. Not every day, but enough that people at the office started noticing, started making assumptions. I didn't correct them, let them think whatever they wanted. The truth was simpler and more complicated than office gossip could capture. You seem calmer, she said one afternoon, picking at her pad tie. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Hired an investigator, I said. Figured if Lena wants to play games, I should at least know the rules. That's smart, strategic. She paused. Just don't lose yourself in the process. Revenge has a way of eating people from the inside. It's not revenge. Okay, she said, but her eyes said she wasn't entirely convinced. Maybe she was right to doubt. Maybe I was lying to myself about my motivations. But every time I questioned whether I was going too far, I remembered that HR complaint. Remembered how it felt to sit in Patricia's office while she asked if I was mentally stable enough to work. Lena had tried to take everything from me, my job, my reputation, my sense of self, and she'd done it casually, thoughtlessly, like I was just another obstacle to remove from her path. So no, this wasn't revenge. This was survival. Work became a minefield. Every meeting, every email, every casual conversation felt loaded. Patricia had cleared me after the counseling session, a 45-minute conversation where I explained the context of those messages, and the therapist agreed I was processing a normal breakup in normal ways. But the damage was done. People knew there had been an investigation. They looked at me differently, carefully, Sophia noticed. "You want to talk about it?" she asked one afternoon over lunch. We'd fallen into a routine, Vietnamese place on Tuesdays, Italian on Thursdays, friendship that was slowly becoming something else, though neither of us had named it yet. "My ex tried to get me investigated at work," I said. "Sent HR old text messages out of context." Sophia's chopsticks stopped halfway to her mouth. "That's incredibly vindictive." "Yeah. Well, turns out she doesn't handle rejection well. Is there anything I can do? Just keep being normal. Everyone else at work treats me like I'm about to crack. You treat me like a person." She smiled. "You are a person. An occasionally annoying person who steals my spring rolls, but still a person." "I only stole one spring roll. Today?" We laughed. It felt good, normal, like maybe I was actually rebuilding something instead of just surviving in the rubble. 2 weeks later, Frank called me to his office. "Got what you needed," he said, sliding a thick folder across the desk. "Your ex has been busy." Inside was a timeline that made my jaw clench. Lena and Mason's relationship had started 8 months before she asked for space. Not an impulsive thing, not a mistake, a calculated exit strategy. Frank had documented everything: dinner receipts, hotel bookings, photos of them together at restaurants and bars, text message metadata showing hundreds of messages exchanged. But what really caught my attention was a series of emails Frank had obtained through a source at Lena's company. Nothing illegal, just screenshots from someone who'd grown suspicious of her expense reports. She was getting sloppy toward the end, Frank explained, tapping one particular email chain. "See this? She submitted an expense report for a client dinner in Boston on March 15th. Problem is, the client she named wasn't even in Boston that week. He was at a conference in Miami." "How do you know that?" Called his office, said I was confirming attendance for a different event. His assistant pulled up his calendar, told me everything I needed. Frank flipped to another page. "And this hotel stay in Portland?" She claimed it was for an industry conference. But the conference she listed didn't exist. I checked with the hotel. Mason Reyes checked in at the same time, same floor, rooms right next to each other. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't just a relationship. This was systematic deception, a fraud on top of infidelity. "Here's the interesting part," Frank said, pointing to another section. "See these charges? They were from Lena's company credit card. Dinners billed as client meetings, hotel stays billed as work travel. All with Mason." "She expensed her relationship," I said slowly. "Yep, and her company has pretty strict policies about personal relationships and expense fraud. I called them anonymous tip line. They're already investigating." "You didn't say it came from you. Anonymous citizen concerned about corporate ethics. They'll find it all on their own during the audit." I stared at the papers, my hands gripping the edges of the folder until my knuckles went white. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt vindicated. And part of me felt nothing at all. Just numb acceptance that the woman I'd married had been living a double life for months. "There's more," Frank said. "The HR complaint? Tracked the IP address. Your ex sent it from her work computer. Real smart. Left a digital trail a mile wide. Can I use this? You can give it to your boss. Document that the complaint was malicious and provable. Cover yourself legally. But I'd recommend not doing anything else with it. Let karma do the heavy lifting." "What about Mason? Is he facing anything?" Frank shrugged. "He's technically contract labor, not a direct employee. Different accountability structure. He'll probably skate on most of it, but his reputation will take a hit when word gets around. So Lena takes the fall, and he walks away clean. That's usually how these things work. The person who signs their name to the paperwork is the one who gets caught." Frank closed the folder. "Look, I know this isn't the fairness you were hoping for, but sometimes justice is messy. Sometimes the people who deserve consequences don't face them, and sometimes the consequences come from unexpected places." I stared at the papers. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt vindicated. "There's more," Frank said. "The HR complaint? Tracked the IP address. Your ex sent it from her work computer. Real smart. Left a digital trail a mile wide. Can I use this? You can give it to your boss. Document that the complaint was malicious and provable. Cover yourself legally. But I'd recommend not doing anything else with it. Let karma do the heavy lifting. I took the folder home. Spent that evening reading through every page, every piece of evidence. The story it told was uglier than I'd imagined. Lena hadn't just fallen for someone else. She'd methodically planned her exit while lying to my face, while sleeping in our bed, while accepting anniversary gifts and acting like our marriage mattered. The next morning, I made copies of everything Frank had given me, put the originals in a safety deposit box, kept one set at home, delivered one set to Patricia with a formal statement about the malicious harassment. This is thorough, Patricia said, flipping through the pages. I'll make sure this goes in your file, with a note that you were the victim of workplace harassment. Thank you. Jason, for what it's worth, I'm sorry you went through this. I nodded. Words felt stuck in my throat. That evening, I was at the gym when I saw him. Mason Reyes. Tall, polished, probably dropped $300 on his haircut alone. He was at the weight rack, checking his form in the mirror. I should have left, should have ignored him. Let Frank's investigation do the talking. Instead, I walked over. Mason Reyes? I said. He turned, confusion crossing his face. Then recognition. Then something like fear. Jason Carter, he said carefully. Lena's ex-husband, yeah. We stood there, two men who'd never met but knew everything about each other. The silence stretched out. Look, Mason said, I don't want any trouble. Neither do I said. Just wanted to say one thing. What's that? You left your watch on her nightstand, at the Riverside Inn, 3 days before our anniversary. Tell her to be more careful next time she tries to destroy someone's career. Digital trails are tricky things. His face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Enjoy your workout. I walked away, heart hammering. That was stupid. Reckless. Exactly what Frank had told me not to do. But the look on Mason's face made it worth it. 3 days later, Sophia called me during lunch. Turn on your computer, she said. Lena's company just issued a statement. I pulled up the news. Sure enough, there it was. A vague corporate statement about internal investigations and commitment to ethical practices. No names, but anyone who worked in that industry would know what it meant. Someone was being audited. Someone was in trouble. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mr. Carter, this is Beverly Walsh. I'm calling from Westbrook Consulting. I understand you have information relevant to our internal investigation of an employee. My stomach dropped. I'm sorry, what? We're investigating expense fraud. Your name came up in some documentation. Would you be willing to come in and answer some questions? I looked at the folder on my desk, at Frank's thorough, damning evidence. Yes, I said. I can do that. How's Friday at 2? Friday works. I hung up and sat there, staring at nothing. This wasn't revenge. This was just consequences. Natural consequences for someone who tried to weaponize lies against me. But it felt like revenge anyway. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Sophia met me for coffee that afternoon, took one look at my face and ordered me something strong. What happened? Lena's company called. They want to interview me about the expense fraud investigation. Are you going to tell them everything? I'm going to tell them the truth. That's not the same thing, she said quietly. I know. We sat there in silence. The coffee shop was busy, people moving around us, living their normal lives. I felt detached from all of it, like I was watching myself from somewhere else. You could walk away, Sophia said. Just not go to the interview. Let them figure it out themselves. I could, but you won't. No. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then I'll be here when you get back. Friday came faster than I wanted. I showed up at Westbrook Consulting in my good suit, carrying nothing but the folder Frank had given me. Beverly Walsh was exactly what I expected. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of person who could spot a lie from across the room. Thank you for coming in, she said, gesturing to a conference room. This won't take long. It took 2 hours. She asked me to verify dates, confirm expenses, explain the timeline of my relationship with Lena. I answered everything truthfully. Showed her the receipts, the credit card statements, the hotel bookings that matched business trips Lena had filed expense reports for. And you're certain Ms. Carter used her corporate card for these personal expenses? Beverly asked. I'm certain that's what the statements show, I said carefully. I can only tell you what I have documentation for. She made notes, asked more questions, finally closed her notebook. Mr. Carter, I appreciate your cooperation. This has been very helpful. Can I ask what happens now? That's confidential, but I can tell you that we take expense fraud very seriously. If we find evidence of policy violations, there will be consequences. I walked out of that building feeling like I'd just testified against my own past, like I'd taken something that used to be private, the wreckage of my marriage, and turned it into evidence. But Lena had done that first, when she'd sent those screenshots to HR, when she'd tried to make me look unstable to protect her own secrets. All I'd done was tell the truth. The email came on a Monday morning. Lena's name in my inbox, subject line, "We need to talk." I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Jason, I know you're behind what's happening at my work. I don't know how you got that information or why you're trying to ruin my career, but you need to stop. Whatever you think I did, this is going too far. Call me. I deleted it, blocked her email address, went back to work. But she didn't stop. Text messages, voicemails, messages left with mutual friends asking me to call her back, each one progressively more desperate, more angry. The messages painted a picture of someone watching their carefully constructed life crumble in slow motion. Tuesday morning, they're auditing 6 months of my expense reports. Wednesday afternoon, my boss won't even look at me in meetings. Thursday evening, people are whispering. I know they're talking about me. I didn't respond to any of them. Let her spiral. Let her understand what it felt like to be alone with consequences you couldn't escape. By Friday, the messages had shifted from desperate to aggressive. You think you're so innocent? You think you're better than me? At least I had the courage to admit I was unhappy instead of playing the martyr. I almost laughed at that one. Courage. She thought cheating and lying required courage. The weekend brought a different kind of message. Mason won't return my calls. I think he's distancing himself. Everyone's distancing themselves. I'm completely alone, and it's all because you couldn't just let me go. That one made me pause. Not because I felt guilty, but because I recognized the manipulation in it, the attempt to make her isolation my fault, as if I'd forced her to commit fraud, as if I'd made her build a relationship on lies and stolen moments charged to her company's credit card. Finally, she showed up at my office. Patricia intercepted her in the lobby. I watched from the second-floor window as Lena argued with the receptionist, gesturing wildly, her voice carrying up through the atrium. She was wearing the same gray suit from our anniversary dinner, the one she'd worn when she told me she needed space, but now it hung on her differently, less confident, more desperate. "Jason," she called out when she spotted me. "We need to talk." I walked down the stairs slowly. Every eye in the building was watching. This was going to be a story people told for months. The architect whose ex-wife showed up screaming in the lobby. Great. "Lena," I said calmly when I reached the lobby. "You need to leave?" "Not until you tell me what you did." Her makeup was smudged. Her hair, usually perfect, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under her eyes. Hands shaking slightly. "You gave them information about me. You told them about Mason." I answered questions truthfully in an investigation, that's all. "Liar." The word echoed in the lobby. A few people near the elevator stopped and stared. "You orchestrated this whole thing. You fed them information, told them where to look, probably even told them which expense reports to audit first." I answered questions, I repeated. "The investigation started because someone noticed inconsistencies in your reports. Not my fault you were sloppy about covering your tracks. You're destroying my career." "That's funny," I said, keeping my voice level. "You thought I didn't have one worth saving." She flinched like I'd struck her. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. For a second, she looked like she might cry. Then the anger came back, hot and sharp. "I never said that." "You sent HR screenshots of private messages trying to make me look unstable. You tried to cost me my job. You tried to make everyone think I was unhinged and dangerous. And now you're upset because someone's investigating you? That's different." "How? How is it different?" "Because She stopped, looked around at all the faces watching us. The receptionist with her hand hovering over the phone, ready to call security. Patricia on the stairs, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Sophia near the elevators, looking concerned. "Can we please talk somewhere private?" "No," I said. "We can't. We're divorced. You don't get to show up at my workplace and make demands." "Jason, please." Her voice cracked. "They're going to terminate me. They're talking about pressing charges for expense fraud. This could ruin my life." "Then maybe you shouldn't have committed fraud." She took a step toward me. I held my ground. She was close enough now that I could see the mascara smudged under her eyes, the way her hands were trembling, the desperation radiating off her like heat. I made mistakes, she said quietly. I know that. I hurt you and I'm sorry. But this? What you're doing to me? This is vindictive. This is cruel. This is you trying to punish me for leaving you. No, I said. This is consequences. This is what happens when you build your life on lies and someone finally tells the truth. Her face crumpled. For a second, I saw the woman I'd married, the one I'd loved, the one I'd thought I'd spend my life with, the one who used to laugh at my terrible jokes and steal fries off my plate and fall asleep with her head on my shoulder during long car rides. Then I remembered the hotel receipts, the lies, the anonymous HR complaint, the way she'd looked at me on our anniversary like I was an inconvenience she'd have to deal with later. Patricia? I called up to my boss, who was still watching from the stairs. Can you please escort Ms. Carter out? She's not welcome here. Patricia nodded and came down. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you don't, I'll call security. Lena looked at me one more time. I hope you're happy, she said. Is this what you wanted? To hurt me this badly? I wanted you to leave me alone, I said. You wouldn't, so here we are. Security arrived. 2 uniformed guards who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. They approached Lena carefully, speaking in low, professional tones. She jerked away from them at first, then seemed to deflate. Let them guide her toward the door. At the entrance, she turned back one last time. You'll regret this, she said. Not a threat, just a statement, like she actually believed it. I watched her walk to her car, watched the security guards wait until she drove away. Then I went back upstairs and tried to focus on work, ignoring the whispers and the stares and the way everyone suddenly had urgent business anywhere but near my desk. That should have been the end of it. Should have been the moment where everything settled. But 3 days later, I got a call from Frank. You need to see this, he said. Come by the office. He had his computer pulled up when I arrived, showing me a local news website. Westbrook Consulting terminated 2 senior employees today amid an ongoing investigation into expense fraud and ethics violations, I read aloud. The company declined to name the individuals, but confirmed the investigation began after an anonymous tip in March. Keep reading, Frank said. One source close to the investigation suggests the fraud involved personal expenses being charged to corporate accounts, potentially totaling over $40,000. The company has referred the matter to local authorities. I sat back. 40,000. I'd known it was bad, but seeing the number in print made it real in a way the receipts hadn't. They're pressing charges? I asked. Looking that way, corporate fraud over a certain amount becomes criminal. Your ex might be facing more than just unemployment. I should have felt vindicated. Should have felt like justice was being served. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of the whole thing. Tired of thinking about Lena. Tired of the anger that had been driving me forward for months. Frank, I need you to do one more thing for me. Name it. Find out where Mason is in all this. Is he getting the same treatment? Frank pulled up another file. He'd already been looking into it, apparently. Mason Reyes resigned from Westbrook 2 days ago. Preemptive. He's protected by a different policy since he was technically contract, not employee. He walks away clean. Of course he does. Your ex is the one who signed the expense reports. Her name, her responsibility, her signature on every fraudulent document. He's just a footnote in her story now. The guy she risked everything for, and he bailed the second. Things got complicated. I thought about that, about how Lena had risked everything, her career, her reputation, potentially her freedom. For a relationship that evaporated, the second things got complicated. About how she destroyed our marriage for someone who couldn't even be bothered to stand beside her when she needed support. There's something else, Frank said. Word on the street is Mason's already got a new job lined up in Seattle, starting next month. Clean slate, new city, nobody knows him there. While Lena faces charges. While Lena faces charges, Frank confirmed. What do you need me to do now? I asked. Nothing. Stay away from her. Don't respond to any contact. If she escalates, document it and call the police. But your part in this is done. Whatever happens next is between her and the legal system. I left Frank's office and drove to the park near my house. Sat on a bench and watched the sun set, thinking about consequences and choices and how quickly a life could unravel when you built it on lies. My phone buzzed. Text from Sophia. Heard about the scene at the office. You okay? I typed back. Yeah, just tired. Want company? I can bring Thai food and we cannot talk about your ex. I smiled. That sounds perfect. 2 weeks later, I was at the annual fundraiser for the Historic Preservation Society. Required attendance for anyone in restoration architecture, usually boring speeches, lukewarm wine, forced networking. Lena was on the planning committee, had been for 3 years. This was her event, her moment to shine in front of the city's preservation community. I almost didn't go, but Patricia reminded me that hiding would look like guilt or shame, and I had neither. The ballroom was decorated tastefully, Lena's aesthetic all over it. Cream linens, gold accents, floral centerpieces that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Classical music played softly from speakers hidden in the corners. Everything perfect, controlled, expensive. I grabbed a drink and found a corner to observe from. That's when I saw her. She looked polished again. Professional. The gray suit replaced with something burgundy and elegant. Hair styled. Makeup flawless. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't shown up screaming in my office lobby 3 weeks ago. She was talking to the committee chairwoman, smiling, gesturing elegantly, playing the role she'd perfected over years of networking and social climbing. But I could see the cracks if you knew where to look, the way her smile didn't reach her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept checking her phone like she was waiting for bad news that might arrive at any moment. I was about to leave when I saw the chairwoman's expression change, saw her step back from Lena like she'd just realized she was standing too close to something toxic. Saw her call over another committee member, their heads bent together in urgent whispered conversation. Lena's face went pale. She said something, hands raised in a placating gesture. The chairwoman shook her head, said something sharp, turned and walked away, leaving Lena standing alone in the middle of the ballroom. 15 minutes later, the event was delayed, then postponed, then canceled outright, guests asked to leave with apologies about technical difficulties that everyone knew weren't technical at all. I slipped out with everyone else, the murmur of confused voices following me into the parking lot. Checked my phone in the parking lot. There was a text from an unknown number. Check your email. The email was from an anonymous address. Subject line, FYI. Inside was a forwarded message chain. Between Lena and the committee treasurer, about how certain donations had been temporarily borrowed for urgent personal needs, with promises to replace the funds, embezzlement. On top of everything else, Lena had been embezzling from a nonprofit. My phone rang. Frank. Did you send that email? I asked. Wasn't me, but someone on that committee hired me last week to investigate missing funds. I found the same thing you just saw. Gave them my report yesterday. How much? $12,000 over 8 months. She was planning to replace it after her next bonus, but that bonus isn't coming now, is it? I sat in my car, watching people file out of the event, watching Lena stand in the parking lot, phone to her ear, face pale in the streetlights. This wasn't justice anymore. This was collapse. Total, catastrophic collapse. And I'd started the domino effect. The next day, Mason called me. I almost didn't answer. What do you want? I said. I need you to know I'm done with her, he said, words rushing out. I'm leaving town, taking a job in Seattle. I wanted you to hear it from me. I'm not part of whatever's happening between you two anymore. Why are you telling me this? Because she's spiraling, calling me 20 times a day, showing up at my apartment, blaming me for everything, and I can't do this anymore. I thought we had something real, but she just needed someone to blame when her life fell apart. That's what you get for building a relationship on someone else's marriage, I said. Silence. Then, yeah, I guess so, for what it's worth. I'm sorry about all of it. He hung up. I stood there holding my phone, feeling nothing. That evening, Sophia came over. We'd been spending more time together. Not officially dating, but something close. Something that felt like it might become something real once I'd finished excavating the ruins of my past. I saw the news about the fundraiser, she said, setting down takeout containers on my kitchen counter. Are you okay? Honestly, I don't know. Want to talk about it? I told her everything. The investigation, the fraud charges, the embezzlement, watching Lena's life implode in real time. You didn't cause any of this, Sophia said when I finished. She made her choices. You just stopped letting her make you the victim of them. It doesn't feel that simple. Because you're a good person. Good people feel guilty even when they shouldn't. She handed me chopsticks. Eat. You look like you haven't had a real meal in days. We ate in comfortable silence. Eventually, I said, she was going to destroy me. If I hadn't fought back, I'd be the one losing my job, my reputation, everything. She would have kept going until there was nothing left of me. I know. So why do I feel bad? Because you loved her once. And watching someone fall apart, even someone who hurt you, isn't easy. Sophia set down her food. But Jason, you're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to tell the truth. You're allowed to want consequences for people who wrong you. Even if those consequences are this severe? She chose severity when she escalated. You just stopped absorbing the damage. Later, after Sophia left, I opened my laptop, searched Lena's name, found her LinkedIn profile, already updating. Job title changed to available for opportunities. Professional photo replaced with something more casual. Her Instagram was private now. Her Facebook hadn't been updated in weeks. I closed the browser, poured myself a drink, sat at my dining room table, the same one where I'd set up our anniversary dinner all those months ago, and thought about revenge versus justice, consequences versus cruelty. And I realized something. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt done. The package arrived 3 weeks later. No return address, just my name on the label. Inside was a burner phone with one number programmed in and a note. Call me, please. I stared at it for a long time. Then I dialed. Jason. Her voice was rough, exhausted. Thank you for calling. What do you want, Lena? To apologize, to explain, to ask if there's any way you could... Could what? Make this go away? I can't do that. I wouldn't even if I could. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But Jason, they're talking about pressing criminal charges. The nonprofit, the company, they want to make an example of me. I could go to court. I could. Then you'll face the consequences of your actions. Silence on the line. Then quieter. I never meant for any of this to happen. Yes, you did. You chose Mason. You chose to steal from your company. You chose to embezzle from a charity. You made every single one of these decisions deliberately. I was confused. I was unhappy. I made mistakes. Mistakes are accidents. This was systematic. You built an entire alternate life while lying to my face. So did you, she snapped, some of the old fire returning. You hired investigators. You fed information to my company. You systematically dismantled my career. Tell me how that's different. I told the truth. That's the difference. Every single thing that's happened to you is a direct result of your own actions. I just stopped letting you hide from them. By ruining my life. By defending mine. You tried to destroy my career first, remember? The HR complaint, the anonymous screenshots. You wanted me isolated and unemployable so I couldn't interfere with your neat little exit plan. I was hurt. You'd already replaced me. 3 months after you dumped me. 3 months after you checked into a hotel with Mason 3 days before our anniversary. You don't get to claim victim here. More silence. I could hear her breathing, hear the tears she was trying to hold back. What do you want from me, Jason? Tell me what I can do to make this right. Nothing. There's nothing you can do. We're done. We've been done. The only difference is now everyone else knows what you really are. And what's that? Someone who destroys things and calls it self-discovery. Someone who hurts people and calls it growth. Someone who steals and lies and manipulates and then acts surprised when there are consequences. I'm not that person. Yes, you are. You've always been that person. I just refused to see it because I loved you, but I'm not that blind anymore. I heard her break down. Real sobs now, not the manipulative tears she'd used before. Genuine anguish. Part of me wanted to comfort her. The part that had spent 4 years loving her, that had planned a future with her, that had believed in us. But that part was buried under too much wreckage now. I have to go, I said. Wait, Jason, please. Goodbye, Lena. I hung up, turned off the burner phone, put it in a drawer and tried to forget it existed. But I couldn't forget. Not yet. Because 2 days later, she showed up at my house. I saw her car pull up from my window, watched her sit there for 10 minutes before finally getting out and walking to my door. When the doorbell rang, I almost didn't answer, but ignoring her hadn't worked so far. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hair unwashed, the polish completely gone. I shouldn't be here, she said. I know that, but I needed to see you face to face. Needed you to see what you've done. What I've done? I've lost everything. My job, my reputation. My savings are going to lawyers. The man I thought I loved won't even return my calls. My friends won't talk to me. And it's all because of you. No, I said firmly. It's all because of you. I didn't make you cheat. I didn't make you commit fraud. I didn't make you embezzle from a charity. You did all of that. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. You could have walked away. You could have just let me go and moved on with your life. I tried that. You sent HR a dossier trying to get me termed. You forced me to defend myself. So you decided to destroy me? I decided to tell the truth. If the truth destroyed you, maybe you should have built your life on something more solid than lies. She stepped closer. For a second, I thought she might try to hit me. Instead, she just looked at me with something like hatred. I hope you're happy, she said. I hope this was worth it, watching me suffer, watching me lose everything. I'm not happy, I said honestly. But I'm not guilty either. You played a game and lost. That's not my fault. So that's it? You feel nothing? No regret? No sympathy? I feel tired. I feel relieved. I feel free. But sympathy? No. I ran out of that around the time you tried to ruin my career. I never tried to. Yes, you did. Own it. Just once. Own what you did. She stood there, trembling. I could see her fighting with herself, pride warring with desperation. Fine, she finally said. Fine. I sent those messages to HR. I wanted you to hurt the way I was hurting. I wanted you to understand what it felt like to have your life fall apart. Are you happy now? No, but I'm done. I reached behind me and pulled out a box I'd prepared. Inside was her wedding ring, the one she'd left on the bathroom counter when she moved out, a printout of the HR complaint, and a note. She opened it with shaking hands, read the note aloud. You wanted control. I gave you consequences. She looked up at me, eyes blazing. You think you're so smart, so righteous, but you're just as vindictive as I am. You're just as cruel. Maybe, I said. The difference is, I was defending myself. You were attacking, and everyone can see that now. Everyone can see that you're petty and vengeful. Then tell them. Post it on social media. Tell all your friends. Tell the world what a terrible person I am. I leaned against the doorframe. But when they ask for your side of the story, you'll have to admit what you did to deserve it. And we both know you're not ready for that conversation. She stood there holding the box, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I loved you, she whispered. Doesn't that count for anything? You loved the idea of me. The architect husband who gave you credibility, the supportive partner who didn't ask questions when you stayed late at work, the safe option you could leave when something more exciting came along. That's not fair. Neither is what you did. But here we are. I stepped back and started to close the door. Jason, she said, voice breaking, please, tell me there's something I can do, some way to fix this. I looked at her one last time, the woman I'd promised to spend my life with, the woman who'd promised the same, the woman who'd shattered both promises without a second thought. There isn't, I said. What's broken can't always be fixed. Sometimes you just have to build something new. I don't know how to do that. Neither did I, but I figured it out. I paused. You will too, just not with me, not anymore. I closed the door, stood there listening to her cry on my porch, listening to her car door slam, listening to her drive away. When the sound faded, I walked to my kitchen, made coffee, sat at the table where I'd once set up an anniversary dinner for a marriage that was already over. My phone buzzed. Sophia? Still on for tonight? Vietnamese place? I smiled. Typed back, absolutely, my treat. The afternoon sun cut through the windows at an angle that made the whole room glow. I looked around at the house that used to feel like a tomb. It didn't feel that way anymore. I wasn't healed, wasn't whole, wasn't ready to pretend the last year hadn't carved pieces out of me. But I was done being destroyed by someone who'd already left. Lena had wanted space, wanted freedom, wanted to find herself without me weighing her down. I'd given her exactly that. An entire universe of space. All the freedom in the world. And the full weight of her own choices to carry alone. She said she needed space, so I gave her a galaxy.